Good morning. Happy President's Day to you. It's Monday, February 20th. I wanted to do something unique, a little bit different in my words, my voice. I've always, in growing up and being in school, I was taught that George Washington never told a lie and Abraham Lincoln was the savior of the black race and the presidents were great. But as I got older and understood the historical significance of fact over opinion, I came to a different conclusion. So today I am going to be doing an essay to celebrate President's Day. It's going to be Provoke Thought Monday. What does President's Day mean to this me, black man? You see, I just read an article that ranked the top 5 presidents of the United States. This list was created by C-SPAN, who surveyed historians from across the country, across the nation, to determine the effectiveness of each of this nation's chief executives. In order of the C-SPAN ranking, the following presidents were ranked as top 5. Number 1, Abraham Lincoln. Number 2, George Washington. Number 3 and 4, Delano and Teddy Roosevelt. And number 5, Dwight D. Eisenhower. The funny thing about this list is that during each term, the only real change in the nation for people of African descent was during the term of Lincoln, where we moved from the bonds and chains of slavery to a newfound freedom. Yet even that freedom was tainted by a vicious civil war as whites in the Confederate Southern states fought to preserve the institution of slavery, while Abraham Lincoln fought to stop slavery's growth beyond the territory it had already gained a foothold in. Even Abraham Lincoln said that if he could preserve the Union and maintain slavery, keep it restricted to those southern states, he would. But that wasn't a satisfactory arrangement for the Confederates. Those Confederate states wanted to not only maintain the chains of slavery, but they also did not want to restrict its ability to expand slavery into other geographic locations of this country. Thus, Lincoln was forced to battle the forces or proponents of this insane, peculiar institution, not to ensure black social equality, but more for reasons that were economic more than humanistic. Let's first take a look at George Washington, the so-called father of American democracy. George Washington not only owned slaves, but he believed that blacks were inferior in every way to any white man, no matter the standing of either man. The Constitution he was charged with upholding saw blacks as simply chattel to be used, sold, whipped, and mistreated and discarded once they had served their physical purposes. Black men, women, and black babies were subjected to horrid conditions for the benefit of their masters. So in my personal survey, that eliminates George Washington as being one of the top American presidents, top 5 American presidents. How can Washington be deemed worthy of greatness when he allowed such a heinous condition as slavery to not only survive, but indeed to prosper? And let's take a look at Teddy Roosevelt. Well, he did in fact create the National Parks program that saved the physical beauty of America from exploitation. But at the same time, Teddy Roosevelt did hardly anything of substance to mitigate the exploitation of people of African descent on the same lands he felt he had to treasure and preserve. Teddy Roosevelt chose to preserve land over preserving the dignity and safety of people of color. Blacks who were swinging on trees and facing abject racism while Teddy Roosevelt was saving the trees and the mountains' majesty. Thus, to me, it eliminates Teddy from any list of great presidents. His cousin Delano Roosevelt, although he saved the world from German domination and created a social safety net for white Americans, Roosevelt was the president during a time when Jim Crow was flourishing. His Social Security program, which was a wonderful effort to reward those who toiled in the work environment, specifically excluded domestics and farm workers from receiving its benefits. Guess what? More than 90% of the black working poor were in those excluded positions. He also had no problem with a segregated armed force. It was only after his death that the military was integrated by President Truman. So with that, simply those aspects of his 3 terms of presidency, Franklin Delano Roosevelt can be eliminated, in my mind, from list of great presidents because of his neglect of people of color. His predecessor, Harry S. Truman, was the president who integrated the armed forces prior to the end of World War II. His presidency also was the period when the nation's sporting pastime, baseball, was integrated by Jackie Robinson. So you could say that in terms of significant progress, Harry S. Truman's tenure as president was at least a period of racial progress. Yet even in this period of continual mass migration of Southern blacks away from Southern states, racial harmony was in no way on the decline. Yet I would assess that Truman's presidency was ahead of either Roosevelt's, Lincoln's, and definitely ahead of George Washington. Yet Jim Crow was still a factor in terrorizing blacks throughout the country, and segregation was still significantly impeded black racial progress in almost every sector of this country. Now let's move on to the most tricky of these 5 men, President Dwight David Eisenhower, who was the top military leader during a period of the segregated military during both world wars that America was involved in. Yet Dwight Eisenhower worked for the company and for the country, and he couldn't formulate domestic policies. He could only command those policies that were in force. In Eisenhower's presidency, he nominated Chief Justice Earl Warren, whose Supreme Court ruled that separate but equal was not equal by any means. Thus, it began the elimination of the legality of segregation of public education facilities in the country. Dwight Eisenhower actually sent troops to Little Rock, Arkansas, to preserve the safety of those black students integrating a high school in that city. However, in many ways, Eisenhower continued to keep his eyes shut to the abuses that blacks continued to suffer in other aspects of life in this country for people of African descent. So even with Brown versus the Board of Education decision in his presidency, I cannot place him as a race-worthy advocate for the total equality of black people in America. Although I would say that he would be number 1 on my list of presidents prior to the passage of the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Bills of 1964 and 65. Had Lyndon Baines Johnson really sought to implement and expand the features of his legislation and not lost focus and lost his social consciousness vision of support for people of color, Lyndon Baines Johnson would have probably been placed on a pedestal for bringing social, legal, and economic equality to all people of this nation. However, you cannot forget that these laws were passed but not fully implemented because of the circumstances that LBJ created. He provided solutions with a check marked insufficient funding. The presidencies of Kennedy failed people of color, as did the presidencies of Nixon, Reagan, both Bushes, and Clinton. Clinton's terms actually submitted to mass incarceration of men of color in this nation. The only two presidents who have reached any level of action for people of color in this esteemed office, in my personal opinion, has been James Carter, Jimmy Carter, and Barack Obama, although both of these terms were severely hindered by the opposition's support of engaging against any real methodology of actual change for total economic and social equality for people of color. Now today we seemingly have allowed a man of very questionable values to hold this office, supposedly destined for men of greatness. 30 days into his term, he is dedicated to rolling back whatever freedoms and gains we as people have fought so hard to secure. So when we celebrate the day of President's Day, all the 45 men who held the office, are we only to celebrate the greatness of these men and ignore all the shortcomings of each as it relates to securing economic and social justice to people of color in this nation? Today, especially today, as we continue to seek a solid grounding for all people, we look towards the office of the president to be the social bully pulpit of justice. Well, is that happening? Is it happening now? Is it happening today? So what does President's Day actually mean to a black brother or sister in this country other than a day off to frolic and shop? Well, as Edwin Starr made this term very popular during the 1970s, absolutely nothing. Say it again. This has been my essay on what does President's Day mean to me as a black man. Have a great remainder of your President's Day and a great remainder of the week. God bless.